So welcome to the Stellify podcast. I'm very honoured to have Howdie Mickoski with me this evening. Thank you so much for joining me, Howdie. Much appreciated. Howdie, I came about your work probably 18 months ago. I was on a journey myself, if you like. I've been on a bit of an awakening journey since 2012, actually. And I learned about corruption, and I'd like to ask you a few things on that, my experience, if that's okay. But when I've come into your work, it's come at the right time for me, because I ended up on a Gnostic trail probably 18 months ago as well, and everything just seemed to resonate for me on where we're at in this reality. So it's truly an honour to have the opportunity to chat to you. So back in 2012, I went through a messy divorce. I had a terrible marriage, and what a trauma, if you like. And it's quite interesting, really, because I had a friend who was a psychic medium. And when I was going through this traumatic period, me and my daughter had moved to a little house just out of town, kind of thing. And I was struggling terribly financially to pay the bills and just, keep anything going. And I was really on my knees at that point. And my friend said to me, he said, "Ant, you need to ask your angels for help." And I went, "What are you talking about? It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life." Anyway, he said, "No, you say it out loud. So when your daughter's in bed tonight, say it out loud and ask for help." So I did. Felt like a complete idiot. Said it out loud. Went to bed. Didn't think anything of it. The next day, I'm driving in my car. I'm taking my daughter to my mum and dad's house, and I'm driving in my car. And on the dashboard was 11111111, and in the center console it said 1111. I was like, "What is that?" I thought there was something wrong with my car. I pulled over, turned the engine off, turned it back on again. All these ones are still there. Whatever, carried on, drove to my mum and dad's house, got in the house, sat down, as you do, on my phone, flicking through Facebook, and this thing pops up. If you see 111, your angels are listening. I was like, what's all this about? And then 1111 started appearing for me all the time. I started trying to find out what it meant, and it took me to a podcast by a guy called Rick Clay. It was an interview. He's a gentleman that sadly died 2 weeks after the interview he did with Red Ice radio station, and he talked about the corruption of this world that I'd never heard of before. It was completely new to me. So I was then taken into the rabbit holes. That was the start of my journey. Now, obviously, listening to you, and the journey's taken me further. I've been through the new agey thing and everything else, and I'm now recognizing the fallacy of that, and the way that takes you in, and you're giving away your power and everything else. But I just find it fascinating that actually that moment that changed my worldview, changed everything for me, even though it was asking for help with something, has took me to this point where I'm having a conversation with you today about the madness of this reality. I'm not got so much of a question, but what's your impression on that story? What's your thought?
Well, do you want the nice answer, or do you want the answer that's a little more intense?
No, you'll give it to me the intense, because I know what you're going to say. I want to hear it from you, because sure. I have come to this conclusion, I think, anyway.
So, just by the way, for anyone who has never heard of me and wondering why is he having an interview with me? I used to always do, the first question the interviewer asks is, "Tell us about yourself." And I put up a 15-minute, I answered that question for all the rest of the interviews I ever do, and can put a link in the description box in case you're wondering, why should I listen to this guy? What's this guy's story? Pause, go watch that, and then you can come back.
Okay. Yeah, that's a terrible interview style by me, that, by the way. I should have said that.
It's fine. So you've got some issues that we don't, certainly on my 30-year journey, you don't really think. You get this you get this presentation. This is a story that was very new age pushed in the 1990s, which was the idea of coincidence and meaningful synchronicity. That if a synchronicity happens, it's somehow it's your destiny talking to you, it's God talking to you, it's your spirit guide, it's whatever. It's if there's a coincidence, that's great. You should follow it. Now, and I lived that way. I got to admit, I lived that way for a lot of years. Followed the coincidences, which often led me into really dangerous pits. And it wasn't until I began writing Exit the Cave and really beginning to get comfortable with the years, because it's not like Exit the Cave just manifested in 2022, right? It'd been part of my writing for 20 years, but it took a while for me to get comfortable with it. And now I started to realize that the level of manipulation we are under is constant. And the level of, let's call it, directly manipulating what we do and what we think is beyond whatever we've imagined. So the challenge becomes, like, if you have an honest inner drive to understand something, know something, to you are in a sense then tapping into, not out there, you're tapping into in here. So you're tapping into your deeper self. You're tapping into the thing which you really are. That thing which you really are can literally like manifest a doorway in front of you to kind of say, yeah, it's about time you started paying attention to me. Here's what I want you to look at. Here's where we need to go. So that's the positive part. If it's coming from the external, you might say, if it's the external presenting something to us to get us to move in a direction, then that's probably, in Gnostic terms, that's probably Archons trying to get us in a dangerous location. So your story as it comes up, if I was going to answer that, that sounds like a bit of both. So it sounds like a bit of that story. There was something in you through your time of trauma, because time of trauma, if you use it well, will start getting you to go inside to ask, how did I get to this place? How did this, that happened for me when I went through my years of trauma and got to the point where I wanted to kill myself. And I was asking, I had to start asking, well, what was it about me that brought me to this point? Like, I can blame everything out there, but what was it about me? And as you begin to do that, you start unraveling parts of yourself. So that can take you deeper. But as you go deeper, the external, the stuff that doesn't want you to do that, can say, we can take this guy now and give him a big left turn and make him look like he's doing something great. And then they throw this coincidence in front of you, right? They throw this new job opportunity, they throw this girl, they threw this whatever, and you move towards it, and it causes problems. So if you recapitulated your experience you just told me and about the next 8 months of that, I bet you're going to see elements of both of things, where one part of the things that are happening are taking you to something really positive, and something else is like literally just dragging you in a direction you don't want to go. That would, without knowing you really well, that would be my assessment.
And it's interesting you say that. So following that, me and my partner, who were still together, it's 11 years now we've been together. And so when we got together, which was probably about a year after that 11/11 moment, I'd moved to a smaller house with my daughter in the countryside. So I went down the new agey thing at that point. The 11/11 thing took me to this new agey thing, and I started doing the law of attraction and the secret and all that kind of stuff. And we did this little wish box, me and my daughter, and it was like we're wishing to move to the countryside. And within 6 months, we were moving to the countryside. We were in this little house. But then I met my partner, who we've got today. And as I was cleaning the house, 2 weeks we'd lived there, Howdie. I was cleaning the house, I was cleaning the kitchen, and I find this little piece of paper on the floor, folded up. And I opened the piece of paper, and it says, "Don't forget to breathe." I still got the piece of paper upstairs, and was asking everyone in the house, the 2 kids that were there and the missus, where does this come from? Does anyone recognize this piece of paper? Nobody had a clue, no idea. Within 6 months, my partner fell ill. Within 6 months, and very, very poorly she was as well, to the point we were in hospital maybe 100 times in the first year. We were taken she was in a wheelchair by year 8. She nearly died because of the medical situation. The NHS had prescribed the drugs that nearly killed her. Various other things. It was a journey and a half. You know, so it was interesting reading the chapters of your new book where you talked about relationships and partners that, you know, the kind of twin flame thing, which isn't a twin flame thing, but where you're tested almost. And I feel, in a way, me and my partner was like, you are going to be tested. You want to stick together, you're going to be tested. And we went through the most horrific period of time, but we're still together. You know, it's been a battle. She's out of a wheelchair now. She's doing a lot better thanks to cannabis. Actually, she's off fentanyl and various other things. But again, it's just the stories that the traumas, the tests, the tribulations you can kind of constantly put under, and you feel like you're constantly battling everything just to get above water. Sometimes it's an insane world.
That's all this place is. This place is a place designed to create energy theft, with its main purpose, with suffering being a big part of it, distortion being a larger, right? Like I say, I now call it a suffering pit of distortion.
Yes.
Which is a combination of both, but it's the world does not have to be designed like this. An all omnipotent creator could have created something completely different. So the fact that this is what was created either means the creator doesn't care, just created anything and really doesn't give a shit. That's one answer. Or it was created very calculatedly to be exactly what it is. So when someone like Alexander Pope, right, wrote, like, in a sense, there's nothing wrong in the world. Wrong is not possible here. And then he said, but everything is insane. How can those two statements match up? Well, if the world was built to be insane, then it's exactly perfect. And that's, I think, what started to happen for some people in the last 4 or 5 years. The insanity started to get so great that people were not just saying, hey, things are crazy. Some are starting to realize it's always been crazy. We just, it was a little more subtle. A lot of people didn't see it, right? You know, it took a long time. And I started seeing it 30 years ago. But so once you come to that realization that that's what the world is built for, and this is where I was able to finally root myself in being able to write the new books that came out of, because Falling for Truth is the book that told my 8 or 10 year story of all the work I did with the teachers I had, the death experience, all of that. But when I finally was able to reconcile all that and realize, yes, it's an insane world, it's a world of hell, and it can never get better. It can never improve. It's the greatest, for me, calming experience possible. Because, all right, that means it can't be fixed. It's not my job to fix it. It's not my job to change this place. All I can do is continued transformation of the thing here, of the experience that's happening here, and be of some value to those that I come across, be they people, animals, trees, rocks, rivers, it doesn't matter. We're all living in a suffering reality together. So is there any way to be of some value and have some empathy and be some kind of friend to someone else that's experiencing a suffering reality? And therefore, the energy I feel now goes to less places, but it has much more effect when it is used.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. It's around 2020, because 2020 was a pivotal point for a lot of people, I think, as well. So we signed for a pub the day they shut the pubs in the UK, and it became apparent to me that I wasn't there to run a business either. I was there to open the doors to people that are aware of the insanity, if you like, of the 3D side of things, at least the 3D side of things of what was going on politically and the pressures that people were put under. And we became a place, but we lost everything again. So that was another thing we lost. We lost our home. We lost, many thousands of pounds and this, that, and the other. So again, even though we were doing the right thing, and I wouldn't change anything. It cost, but it was an experience that allowed me to then start looking at myself, because I had a nervous breakdown at that point. I was totally exhausted, and I was then I was forced into my shadow at that point. So it made me look at myself, and I've not gone into the recapitulation in detail like I know you spent 4 years doing yours. I've been writing my memoirs. I've been going through my past and my traumas and working on those situations. It's been hugely beneficial for me, because I've become more aware of the world I'm in. I've become more aware of the person I am, but also that this person is a story. It's just a story. And then it's sort of like I felt, I need to remember who I truly am. If this is just a story, where did I come from, Howdie? And how do I get back to that? Because I feel now a complete alien.
That's a very common experience for a lot of people. That's the way, and so they wrap it into terms of like, well, I must have been brought here from somewhere else. I must come from another planet. That's the best way they can kind of process this feeling. But of course, the great shift begins to recognize that it's not the Howdie character is exactly where the Howdie character is supposed to be in the Matrix. But the realization, when the realization happens that that's not what I actually am. That's a character in a video game. That's, that this deeper awareness, you might say, is connected to and has been in a coma for a long time. Basically, this character for 30 plus years was just running in complete robot mode, doing its complete programmed way of living.
Yeah.
And that thing which was truly there was still in the coma. And that's where the shift starts to happen. And it happens two ways. Like normally, because there's two directions, right? There's the direction of finding out what's the truth of reality, what's the truth of this thing we're in, what's the truth of the Matrix, what's the truth of Plato's cave, and then there's, well, what's the truth of this thing that I called myself me, which is self-definition. There are two parts of a larger journey. So in my case, I did the external first. I worked through the external world. I'd been reading right from the beginning these ideas. The world's an illusion. The world's a dream. Well, what does that mean? And thankfully, the teachers I had at the time, the Korean monk and the native medicine men, were giving me specific exercises to test reality. And I tested reality for about 8 years, and it failed miserably. But the mistake that almost always tends to happen is when that realization comes, reality's fake, but I'm real. That's the great spiritual mistake, right?
Yeah.
The world's an illusion, but not me. And when I had when I fell in the river in front of the waterfall in the canyon and basically acknowledged my death, and all of that was gone. So, like you say, everything was. You're calling it a story. I just called it. I called it transparent. So body, thoughts, mind, experiences, emotions, everything. Right? It was non-existent, transparent. But all that was there, that was left when all of that was gone, was just this witnessing awareness, this very clear observing awareness. That was an awareness I had never touched before. You always have an awareness of, oh, this is what I'm thinking, and you're watching your thought, and that is a type of awareness, but this is an awareness several deep, much deeper than that. Yeah. And that's the truth of who we are. That's the realization of emptiness, or the realization of the nothingness of which we are, which is also the everythingness of what we are. And it becomes such a challenging thing, because this place puts its focus externally. This place wants you focused out there. And it doesn't matter what you're focused on, as long as it's out there, and it doesn't matter whether you like it or you dislike it. It doesn't matter whether you go left or you go right. It doesn't care, just as long as your focus is there. And it's not here you want your focus. This is one of the errors that I made for a long time, which everyone seems to make when they say you need to go within. You need to spiral inward. You need to go within. So you think, that means I need to go inside my skin. I need to go into my mind or into my feelings, which at the beginning, that is the first step of beginning the turn, but that's still not going within. Going within is to go within the self, and it's to realize that even thoughts, feelings, emotions, experiences, memories, those are all also outside of this much deeper self. So going within actually means to literally go, I call it to go backwards, away from even your own physical self into the good word totality, or the awareness that is what you are. And that's the work. The work becomes this ability to learn what reality really is so that it fools us less. It still will fool us. That's just the way it's built. And we're here, it'll fool us. But we want to be fooled less. We want to get to know the magician's tricks so that we know most of the tricks there's only one or two. Every time once in a while, a new one shows up. And I should have seen that one, but a good trick, But then we're doing the work of, okay, let's define exactly who and what I am, because until you know that, everything one is basing their entire belief structure on is a question mark, because you don't really know. So that's why it's a critical part of the work is to have that complete definition. And then the more that happens, the easier this interaction between self, not self, and material thing, it gets easier to have all of that begin to function in a bit harmonious way.
And like you said, it's such a setup in terms of manipulation. Your ego mind identity will never want to let go of the outside, will it? It's always, we're constantly, it's a barrage. It's you never stop being distracted by something. It's so difficult to switch away from something in your existence. It's wow, what a challenge! And how do you do that?
It doesn't matter. And the system knows you well. The system has a complete book on you and me. They know what temptation or what fear or whatever to throw in our way at any moment to get us, off track, to get us on a different record groove. And then just stay in that record groove. And of course, this is a minor preparation for what happens in the after death state, when the biggest tricks are thrown at us, where the biggest temptations get thrown at someone, and to a very confused soul who's now just died in a non-physical state, for the majority of the world have not spent any time getting used to being in a non-physical state. So as soon as you're out of this body, it's very confusing. You've probably lived a life of intense trauma. And all of a sudden, here comes dead grandma, here comes Jesus, here comes Buddha, here comes this beautiful light and promises you, if you just come with us, everything will be fine. We'll give you whatever you want, and back you go. And you're back in, and all of a sudden you're a baby again, screaming, shit, I'm back in this reality again. How did I let this happen? And so for me now, I guess I really think you talk about Gnostic terminology. I guess for me, I'm even more focused on being Cathar-like, because the number one focus of everything of a life of a Cathar was to end the reincarnation cycle. And that's it. That anything else was second. That is number one on the list, and not even the fear of dying would get them to, which happened to many of them, right? They literally were burnt at the stake by the Church of Rome, and they still would not. All they had to do was they just said, if you just acknowledge that you were wrong and we were right, you can walk home and go back to your village. Nope. They just went up in flames. And that's conviction. That's the intensity of conviction that someone needs on the path of self-definition. Not that I think the Cathars actually did what they said they were trying to do. I've looked really hard in the little bit of information that's trying to get me to say what specifically was their pathway. Did they really have it? I'm not really sure, but they had the right. I think they had the right intention. They had the right direction, and I'm working on trying to fully unravel exactly what they were doing, and I hope to get a little bit more this summer of what they actually knew.
Do you think any civilizations have done? I mean, like, didn't the Mayans just kind of disappear? I mean, is there any? Because you've done a lot. You're a historian yourself, really, aren't you? You've done a lot of deep digging on these things. Have you found anything like that out?
See, I don't know. Like that is true. The Mayans, no one knows what happened to them. There were tens of millions of them, and then all of a sudden it seems like they're just gone, and there's no bodies. And it's not an archaeologist. What do you call them? Who study anthropologists, right? Who study Central American cultures. Anthropologists, historians, and archaeologists, all doing the same thing, but you need a different name. So and they really can't explain where they went.
Yeah.
Now the same would be the pyramid builders, particularly of ancient Egypt, but even if you want to take it what we're just talking Mexico, like places like Teotihuacan and Tula. These places are old. Like, it was one of the great understandings I got too when I realized that, oh yeah, the pyramids were not built by Old Kingdom Egyptians. The original pharaonic Egyptians, literally, they were trying to figure out the pyramids just like we're trying to figure out the pyramids. They maybe had a little bit better tools, but they didn't build them, and they actually didn't know what they were for. And they were like literally the first archaeologists. And if you look carefully at some of the crude, the main tunnel structures of any pyramid in Egypt are perfect. Like, they're literally geometrically perfect. The masonry is perfect. But then there'll be a few other tunnels that are kind of just, looks like you and me made them. And somebody may say, well, that was some British guy in the 1880s. And no, I think that was the ancient Egyptians. The ancient Egyptians were themselves trying to dig into a few areas of these places and figure out, what is this thing? How do we use it? Because then you find that the Old Kingdom Egyptians did build some pyramids, and you can obviously tell the difference because they're built like some 5-year-olds just piling up a bunch of stones, as compared to the 8 or 9 perfect structures that exist. And for me, it still bothers me a bit because, as you know, I'm big on changing the historical timeline, on questioning everything about history. It's all open for question. But when somebody says something like, oh, Napoleon's soldiers in France, they built the pyramids in the 1800s. What? And I say to them, well, when you went there and you studied the pyramids and you had your experiences and you did your measurements, what was it? Oh, no, I look on the internet. I look at some pictures, and you can't understand something like an ancient Egyptian pyramid without spending, and not just going there on a trip for a day. You have to spend months going through it again and again and again, deepening your experiences. I can now say that I've been in maybe 30 pyramids around the world, and each one of them, each one has its own unique experience. Each one has its own, literally, like, it doesn't matter which one. We pick one pyramid, I would tell you a story that you'd be like, what? That's what happened? Yeah, that's what happened. That's what happened in that space. They are literally beyond comprehension. So here's the problem. Here's the thing that makes it even harder, I think, to understand this stuff historically, is when you recognize that this is a type of simulation. I call it a simulacra, but it's a type of simulation.
Yeah.
And the simulation hasn't been just running constantly for millions of years. This simulation that we're in is maybe only 200 years old. Everything before our simulation started is from a previous simulation and was literally like computer downloaded into a brand new video game and made ours, the one we're experiencing. But that means something like even the temples of Rome and Greece and Egypt, they're not from our simulation. They were built under different rules, under different coding, under different everything. They don't really match. And then you go back to the pyramids, which might be 2, 3, 4, 8, 10 simulations back. It's one of the reasons no one can understand them or figure them out, because they're literally like from another universe. And once I got that understanding, right, they are literally like from 10 simulations back. It's okay that I don't understand. I can study it for the rest of my life. And if I'm honest, I'll know I won't be able to understand them because I'm using the coding system I've got of how this reality functions, and they functioned in a completely different reality. They've just brought them in here to keep the historical narrative running. But they're not part of our simulation. Somebody said somewhere, he said, if you want to know if you're in a simulation, the best way to test it out is look at history. If you have history that you can't explain, if there's parts of your past that are not easy to explain, that probably tells you you're in a simulation. Because if someone's building a simulation, you put your time focused on the present and the simulation going forward. You don't need to put a lot of coding into the past. That's a waste of time. You're coding the start of the simulation and where the simulation goes, right? The backstory is just, all you need is backstory. You just need what the Westworld robot needs to know to kind of function. But you want it to move forward for the experience. And that's our reality. That's a perfect description of our reality. Our past is one gigantic question mark. And to me, that again leads to, all right, Westworld robots, all backstory.
Yeah. And like Dark City, it reminds me of Dark City, where they literally would just stop time and make alterations to the plane, in effect, and you wouldn't know any different, would you? How would you possibly know if you've been put in a coma for that second, or however long it takes to do it? You would never know. Just
no. So the Westworld was at least the first season. That was a very powerful teaching tool about this reality. Actually, very, very powerful. Once you realize that the robots are us, we are the robots. We are the ones that are constantly being reset. We are the ones that are dying, being reincarnated, but not reincarnated into a new body, reincarnated back into the same body, the same experience, the same bullshit again. I can say that because back in 1999, I had a different death experience. In that one, I watched myself die in a different reality, in this body, but just different. And I realized I was truly watching myself die in another version of it. And I started, oh man, there's millions of me's. And that would make sense. If some being wants to create some type of reality and have experiences, well, it's kind of dumb if there's only one of me with one experience. That's very limited. But if you could get a million me's, and as I began tracking, whether you call them parallel lives or loop lives, as I began tracking these other lives I could get to, they were all quite logical lives. Like, I wasn't like the king of, Austria or something. They were all things that were quite logical, could happen. All I had to do was, if I just made one little turn here, a little different here, if I made a different choice of where I went to university, if I did, they were all logical lives that could have turned out. And so for me, I think that's almost logical, that there's 10 million of us in billions of realities having every possible experience imaginable. And what that did for me, it dropped a lot of my specialness, because all of a sudden, no matter what I'm doing here, there's another me that's doing something better. There's another me that's a complete idiot. So how important or special can I be when there's 10 million others doing who knows what?
Yeah, it's interesting that it's like everything could be happening all at once, in effect, as well. And I had a dream once where I careered off a motorway. I was driving, it was a night time, I can vividly see what I was doing. And as I was coming off the motorway, I remember shrugging my shoulders, like I know it's the end, I'm a goner, I'm gone. And then I woke up. And it made me think, it reminded me of, there was a game, I don't know if you remember it, Howdy, in the 80s, a game called Ghosts and Goblins. It was a platform computer video game, and I
No.
hated it. It used to drive me insane because you would get to a certain point, and if you died, you ended up right at the fucking beginning again.
Mm-hmm.
It used to do my nutting. And I thought, that could be my reality in itself. I've had moments where I should have died, and then you think, did I?
Did I?
Did I die? And then I'm just back in the game.
Right.
I don't know. I can't explain that, can I? But it could be.
Very much so. Sure. And it would make a lot of people who, not a lot, but some scholars who have went through Buddhist texts, like original versions of Buddhist texts, had claimed that the Buddha didn't mean by reincarnation this idea that you're getting a new body. He meant continuous recurrence, that he was saying you just keep coming back to the same self again and again and again and again. That's really what was supposed to mean, but that you can't really build a religion around that and create a happy message to sell. So because wouldn't that make sense? If you have lived 8 million lives already, of which say 6.5 million of them were pretty much the life you have now, or let's say the life you had up to say 15 years ago. Let's say that life you've lived 6.5 million times. That would start to get frustrating. Something in you would be saying, I don't want to do this again. I know it's just, I'm sitting down in this theater to watch this movie, but I've seen this movie 8 million times. I just don't want to do this anymore. And I can relate in my past that there was through the traumas and through some other things, it was a moment like that. It was just, I don't want to do any of this anymore. Like any of it. I don't want to, there's nothing. And I was literally thinking, like, what's the most wild thing I could do? Like the thing that there's no way in a million years I would ever think of doing. I should go do that because at least it's not going to feel like I've done it already. Like, is there anything that I could, so like go live in the Arctic somewhere in Alaska and build an igloo and, like literally I thought like that because something was kind of telling me, and then of course, once I had the experience and checked in and realized that that is actually true. There's been 10 million me's, and a lot of those lives were very similar. Guaranteed. They've again and again and again and again and again. There was actually a woman in 1991 that was dating. It was a great relationship actually, and I just decided we need to break up. And I had no idea why, but in tracking in the life that I died, I was married to her in the life that I had died in this car accident. And so and I'd done this, I'm sure, a lot of times. And there was a part of me in this life, which was, for some reason, this life was destined for this very strange discussion point and very strange examination of reality. I knew that if I just continued that, I could not do the work of self-definition that I needed to do. And so things needed to be let go of. And that's another part. If you're going to walk a really true path of self-definition, if that, for the viewers, whoever's listening to this, if that becomes or is becoming part of your life, a lot of things are going to get taken away from you. They just are. Because a lot of things about reality or comfort or the things that you think make life worth living will be the very things that will make it difficult to continue your work of inner exploration. And so as soon as you make that choice, you're basically saying to the rest of reality, I'm checking out of a lot of normalcy here. I'm checking out of the way sort of humans have been built, the job humans have been built to function here. I'm checking out of that. And so it doesn't mean your life is going to be horribly difficult necessarily. It could be, but it is going to mean that a lot of things that we would normally think of should be automatic. It's like the universe will say, well, you're going on a different route, so You don't need any of this stuff. And that's something to just keep in mind, that it may seem like you're failing or you're not succeeding in the world or whatever, but it just means that's also giving you the opportunity then to put the focus where it's meant to be, which is going within.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah, you're changing, you're making that intention, aren't you? And things will change. It's inevitable. People will leave your life. They'll move away from you. They don't understand you anymore. You know, I can hardly have a conversation with most people I bump into these days. They wouldn't want to talk about what I want to talk about, you know.
Once great transformation begins and you begin to drop your normal egoic structures, the normal way that you've always functioned, the hardest will be to be around the people who know you the best, particularly your family. Because your family, particularly your parents, for many cases, they built your egoic structures. The parents were part of the parents' job is build the specific egoic structures that will keep the slave in place in this reality. And all of a sudden you've broken some of those things and they don't like it. They don't like it at all. And they will do whatever it takes to get you to go back to the way you were. And it's a really interesting thing to watch when you've had a breakthrough, when you've had a literal transformation of yourself, and say, actually, that was totally false. And this is more true to the whatever the thing is here. A lot of the people that you were close to will not be happy with that at all.
It's so true. I've experienced it. Yeah, it's so true. And it's weird because I almost, to have any kind of relationship, you have to just have a foot in the old routine. Like I'd have to speak about football, or just to have a conversation, just to keep that relationship going. Right. In respect.
You have to learn how to put on a mask. That's the thing. I mean, everything we're doing, we're always wearing a mask. The problem is we come to believe, like, get this, you need to be truthful. This is one that fools people. This is a very new agey kind of idea. You need to be truthful in all of your dealings with everybody. You need to present from your true self, and you need to be honest all the time. And like, no, actually, that's going to make your life really, really difficult. What you need to do is be honest to the thing that's here, and to always know what you truly align to, you might say. But then each individual moment may require a different mask. And there's no problem to have one mask at the grocery store, one mask here, one mask at work, one mask with your parents, one mask with your wife, one mask with your kids. As long as you remember, that's just a mask I wear in order to have the particular interaction that the moment is calling for. But totally within, I know exactly where I stand, and I know exactly who and what is here, so that when no one's around, then that mask can totally be worn. That's where people get caught. They try to force a particular mask and say, that's me, and that's the mask that must be worn 24 hours a day. And society just bashes you until you start to realize, like, yeah, if I'm with the neighbors on the farm, I'll talk about the weather and I'll talk about how the crops are going. I'm not going to talk about something huge, because that's just going to create a fight. What's the point? Right? Exactly. So you learn how to navigate in the reality in a way that keeps you, again, recognizing that everyone's suffering. Everyone around me is suffering. So why would I need to bring more suffering by, even though I say, well, I'm being truthful, I'm talking about this great and exciting thing that I've experienced, but that's not helping the other person I'm talking to. It's making them very uncomfortable. So I can just make a slight comment, a slight little once in a while, and if they ever get interested, they know where I live. They can knock on my door. They can ask, and it's a much smoother way to live. But it takes time to learn to get comfortable to live in such a way. So, well, you're fooling everybody. Yeah, but you don't realize you're fooling everybody all the time anyway. You're just fooling them with the fake self that you think is you. So now you're fooling everybody, but you're choosing yourself, the fake self that you're going to wear in any moment.
Yeah, it's playing the game, isn't it? We're in a game, so it's playing it the best you can, really, isn't it? We're just trying to get through, aren't we? As unscathed as possible and figure out to get back.
Well, you're trying to make sure that you finish your self-definition. You're trying to not try. Your only goal is to know exactly who and what you are, so that you can, never have to be here again, never have to go through any of this, that you can be home. And so to do that, you need time. It's going to take some time to finish that process. So you need to navigate time. You need some fairly decent health if you can get it. You need to have you need to have your house in order. This is one of the most important phrases of, somebody would say, well, how do you get started? Well, you get started by getting your house in order. And what that means is, from a teacher named Richard Rose, where I got that from, is what the house, of course, eventually is your mind. That eventually you get your mind in such a place where it's calm, it can think clearly, it's not filled with traumas and pain and suffering. And so, but to do that, there's a long process to get to that point. And it begins with things like figuring out what's good for my body. If you're having 10 cups of coffee in the morning, you start to realize that's not a really good thing for me. What are the things I'm eating or drinking or smoking or doing in my day? How do I fix that? How do I get my life to such a point where I'm comfortable but not going crazy, but I can create the time I need for the work I need to do? How do I go in and look at my own mind and look at my own traumas and not run from that, and begin to transform and transmute the story of my life? Because the more your house gets in order, the more energy you have available for going to the depth of what you are. And to reach the depth of what you are, you have to cross over death. Death is, you need to literally cross over death and have enough power and energy so that you can cross back and use your life with that knowledge. It's no good to cross over death and have no power, or cross over death, have very little power, come back, and then your mind gets shattered, right? A lot of people who are walking around on the streets talking to themselves or pushing a shopping cart, they're not just completely crazy. Many of them had a real actual mystical experience. They actually crossed over planes and dimensions, but they didn't have their house in order. Their mind at the time was not clear. They were probably, had gone through tremendous traumas, and then they came back and there was nobody to help them, nobody to explain to them what happened. So their mind just literally blew, and that's where they are. So the part of getting your house in order is to have your physical form ready in such a place that when it sees the non-physicality of reality, it handles that fine. It's like, yep, okay, I can handle that. Because it's an interesting thing about the ego. It's an amazing thing about the ego. If the ego is injured, if it's traumatized, if it's not whole, and you get the opportunity to experience emptiness, it won't let you do it. It'll pull you back and it'll say, well, I'm not healed, so it won't let you do it. So we have to heal something that turns out later to be fictional, in order that we can comfortably and safely cross over to the other side. So literally, it may not sound spiritual, like, hey, you had some traumas when you were 10 and you haven't transformed them. Hey, are you smoking cigarettes constantly all day? How much booze are you taking? How much video games are you playing? Porn are you watching? Like, is this really how you're going to get yourself to the totality of yourself? Every little bit that you begin to drop, that's the pathway to truth. The pathway to truth is finding false or finding something that's not helpful and dropping it. That's it. Just keep dropping it. Another thing, and eventually you will get to the one thing that no matter how hard you try to drop it, you can't. And damn, that's the truth. If you knew what the truth was, you wouldn't need to look for it. So because if you're honest, you truly don't, but we do know false. We can find false. And it's literally just drop it and let it go. Drop it and let it go. But as you get closer, those things you have to drop get more and more personal, more and more. Now at the beginning, it's the stuff you hate. Now at the end, it's the stuff you really like. That's really, really hard to drop. That's the pathway. It's just dropping things until you get to the thing, oh, I can't drop it. That's the truth. Oh, wow.
Well, they didn't say this game was going to be easy, did they, Howdie? It's once you start becoming aware,
No.
it gets trickier. It gets even trickier. I mean, I remember, like I said, pre-2012, I remember my life being completely different. You know, you call them, what is it, automated humans rather than NPCs, which I think is a much better way of phrasing it. You know, you live literally 95% of your day on your subconscious mind anyway, and you're just operating on programs. That's it. You just away
But the
you go.
good news is, it doesn't matter one situation, like you're talking about your partner, your wife, and the challenges she's had. It doesn't matter how challenged she is or how active her physical body can be. It's only how active her intent is and how focused her ability to know the truth of herself is. That's actually what it takes, which means it's available to everybody. No matter what your circumstance, it's actually available to you. All that matters is like you say, are you willing to take the challenge? Are you willing to put in the time and find out what happens? And unfortunately, the majority of people, and I'm not disparaging anyone, this is just the truth of it. Most people they feel bad. They're in pain. They just want to find how they can feel better. And there's lots of things you can do to feel better. And there's lots of gurus out there who will promise if you just join them, you'll feel better and you might for a while, maybe for months, maybe for years. But then all of a sudden comes a point where you realize, but you know what? I still don't know what's going to happen when I die. You know what? I still don't know where I came from. You know what? I still don't know what life is. And so you have to go even beyond wanting to be happy or wanting to feel better. There's nothing wrong with that. That's an important part of the path. It's an important part of getting your house in order. Every little bit you can take another step. That's great. But that's not the process of total self-knowing. Means there's another step. That's another challenge, and another step, and another challenge. And that's kind of how it's built. Mr. Park, the Korean monk, we used to teach us. We one time I had this experience and I thought, I think I know everything now. I figured it all out. And he was laughing at me. And then he kind of just said, well, you're kind of in a plateau now. You had a realization, you had just enjoy it for a few weeks. That's good. Kind of meaning like, get some energy back from the work you just did. But then it's going to start again. And start again. What are you talking about? It's going to start again. And a few weeks later, it started again. And I realized, oh yeah, right. It's like the step, nice and plain, calm. Okay, oh, here comes the next step. Boom, back at it again. But it's very easy once you hit that next step, because it feels good to just get your lawn chair, get a nice comfortable drink, and just sit there and watch the waves roll in for the rest of your life. And that's what a lot do, and that's what the books promise. So that's why it's very rare that people will kind of gravitate to someone like myself, who's kind of saying that's just starter point. If you really want to know, you can, but it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Yeah, and expect things to change as well. So that's part of where the courage comes in. You're going to do this work, be ready. But it is valuable though, isn't it? That's the thing. There's so much value in it. You can release some of them boulders you've been carrying for a start that you literally carry for decades.
Well, the greatest thing is even if you didn't succeed, even if you went on this kind of path to try to have total knowing and you died and you didn't succeed, I think at least you would say, you know what though? I gave it a good shot. I put my energy in a good direction. I wasn't just chasing some money and some girls and some fame and whatever. I tried to know myself. And the other thing is you may not figure it all out while you're still alive. I think it happens for some at the moment of death. I think for some, it's like they get the majority of it, but it's like they actually need that final death moment to give them the last bit of like rocket fuel push to get. So sometimes some I've been doing this for 20 years and I know them. They've truly been working hard. Like they have done a ton, but but it hasn't happened for me yet. And I kind of remind them, just keep going, because maybe for you, it's only going to happen when you die. And until, and so you don't want to quit now. You might say, just because that's another way the Archons could get you to, they know, oh, it's going to happen for this person when they die. If they just keep the work up, if they just keep doing their inner work. So we'll just try to make them discouraged, and we'll get them to kind of quit. And then we got them again.
Like
there are trick after trick after trick after trick here. Layer upon layer. It's a Russian doll inside another Russian doll inside of another Russian doll. It's just layer upon layer. And every time you think you've got it figured out, you open it and there's another layer and there's another layer. And like just trying to deal with the reality we live in, like the day-to-day craziness of governments and financial systems. I mean, that's like a very low level of the many, many layers of deception.
100%.
Even that is like a ton of work just to open all of that and see that clearly. I mean, so when you begin to realize, well, I mean, that's not the big, that's like a tiny layer. Like, yeah, that's a tiny layer of how big the matrix of deception actually is. And that's when that's, I think, when someone might start to realize, like, that's how big this work is to unravel. The good news is, though, here's the good news. We're at a point in time, I think, we're switching off from one simulation to another one. That's what all of this transhumanism talk, this AI, this whatever. It's about getting ready for a new simulation. This one's going to get turned off. New one's going to get turned on. And that one's going to be way more trapping, way more. It's literally going to be Neo in the Matrix plugged in, right?
Yeah.
But between that point, between one switched off and one switched on, that means the power is going to be almost completely off for microseconds or whatever it's going to be. That's the opportunity where anyone who has built enough inner energy can go. And I think if we're talking Gnostic terms, I think the Archons know that when they do the switch off point, they're going to lose a lot. The ones who've been doing their work, they know they're going to lose them. They're not so worried about those. They're worried about too many extras being added on now. They're trying to distort a lot of this information right now. Like this topic, exiting the matrix, exiting the cave, soul traps, reincarnation traps. Boy, it's exploding. And on one side, that's good that it's exploding because a lot of people are curious. They're asking questions, right? That's really all this is about. I'm talking because I want people to ask questions. But I also see there's a lot now starting to happen that's taking this stuff and distorting it, turning it in around 180 degrees so that somebody will go to it and think they're getting help or getting some answers, and they're really just actually bizarrely digging themselves back into the matrix again. So I think while this is a great opportunity, it's a huge, as crazy as this world gets, and it's going to get crazier. It's going to get crazier. It's not going to get better. It's going to get more crazy as we go along. It also means the doorway's the crazier it gets, the bigger the doorway is to exit. Because once the simulation is changed over, the doorway is going to go back to being small again. So this is the great opportunity. And I've known some people in the last few years now who have done what normally take people 5 years. They've managed to do it in 3 or 4 months. Like, wow. Things can accelerate now. You can see things faster, more clearly. You can transform things in your life much, much faster in this particular moment than maybe in the last hundreds of years. So if this is something that you think is interesting to you, this is your opportunity. This is your opportunity to go for it, because it seems like the conditions are right, that if you determine you want to be somebody who wants to know who you are and be home, whatever that turns out to be, the chances to do that are great.
Do you think people would, the divine sparks that have done the work would just know? They didn't know that opportunity is there and they'd just go? Or I mean, how do you recognize?
Well, the problem is that the divine sparks, which in Gnostic terms are the we'll call it, I call it just one, the celestial fire that entered into the matrix to power it, and then were divided into many sparks. But the sparks are in a coma. The sparks are Neo in the pod. And so until Sleeping Beauty can be awakened, Sleeping Beauty really can't leave, because Sleeping Beauty is asleep. So that metaphor, that fairy tale, Sleeping Beauty is the divine spark. The divine spark is asleep. The divine spark is requiring a prince to come and wake them up. They're requiring a prince who is of integrity, courage, totality of their knowing, honesty, their house is in order. That's part of what you're doing, getting your house in order. You're becoming the kind of prince that Sleeping Beauty wants to get waken up for, right? She just doesn't want to get wakened by any jackass prince coming by the castle. She wants the prince of integrity. So that's what part of this work is doing, is you're creating a character. You can say, okay, I'm a character in a video game. Yeah, but I'm a character in a video game that had reached a certain point where Sleeping Beauty was able to say, okay, I'm waking up for that. This person has transformed themselves in such a way that I'm getting out of the coma. I'm getting enough energy from what's happened in the dream to wake up from the dream. So once that occurs, and once Sleeping Beauty has been rerouted when the divine spark has been rerouted, I think, into the total awareness, then the matrix can't stop you. Actually,
love that.
The divine spark, an awake, aware, and totally, I'm going to say the wording right. Totally clear awareness spark is more powerful than the matrix. The problem is the Demiurge / Lucifer, whatever you want to call the creator of this place, has put a lot of traps in place, which make it very hard for the divine spark to get that energy. And that's kind of why we have to become unbelievably selfless, because I'm doing the work not for Howdie Mickoski. I'm doing the work for Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's fantastic. Can I ask you, do you think as this simulation, because I had this conversation with somebody else recently on a podcast, and they said this simulation's ending as well, and do you think the elitist globalist types that are trying to push the transhumanism agenda and everything else, do you think they know that this simulation is changing, and hence the great reset and all that crap that they were pulling out? Is that all part of it then?
Yep. Sure. They are either, right, they're either Archons, or they are beings within the system who have sold themselves to the Archons, which means their existence is dependent upon the matrix. The matrix has to exist for them to exist. If the matrix ended tomorrow, all the divine sparks could not be trapped. The divine sparks would leave. All the other things that were part of the matrix would be just disintegrated, right? They would just be gone. They would end.
Yeah.
So they know that. So they need the matrix to continue. And every time, and again, these are all my opinions, right? Don't anyone just instantly agree with what I say or even disagree with what I say. These are my opinions based on my years of research and my experiences. I just want to make sure I always say that every time I have a conversation. But in my opinion, all these, what we'll call changes to a new simulation, so even not a reset, a restart, or is due because as the simulation gets bigger, as it gets larger and larger, and you think how vast the simulation actually is in computer terms: etheric realm, astral realm, super duper realm, heavenly realm, and then tens of billions of various realms in each level. The power, and it's getting bigger. The power source for that is giant. And when it gets to a certain point where the simulation is not generating enough power anymore, they need to, in a sense, upgrade the simulation to something else that generates more power. Now, in this case, they can't get any more divine sparks in. So there's only X amount of power they can get. So what they've realized, I think, is that if you have your power source here and you have the thing you're extracting the energy from, there's loss because it has to move from one to the other. So heat gets lost, energy gets lost. But if they could put the two together, if you can merge, in this case, the human and the machine together, there's no energy loss in the extraction. So they don't need to create more stuff. They just need a better system of having it fused so there's no energy loss. Then they have all the power that they need. Because isn't it interesting that symbolically, the big thing that everyone is talking about in every government, we need more power, we need more energy, we need to upgrade our energy systems, we need better energy systems, we need cleaner energy systems. It's all about energy. Why? Because symbolically, that's what all this is about. The matrix isn't getting enough energy anymore. And if it doesn't get the energy, it'll shut down. And all these things know if it shuts down, they die. So it's an endless war for them of continual energy extraction. They need to keep this going. So I think if you see it through those terms, it makes complete sense what actually is going on. It's a restructuring of how they can obtain energy from all the creatures within the simulation.
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me, and it's almost like then if they were to able to convince divine sparks to enter a transhumanism world, and it's a dream within a dream or simulation within a simulation, then isn't it? They're going to enter this new metaverse, and they're going to be stuck even further down. It's like, what's that film, Inception, isn't it? Whereas he goes deeper and deeper into the dream.
But even better, Ant, is what somebody should be doing is they should be saying, wait a minute, then what happened the last time? What was it that brought me into this simulation? What was it that I decided to think that this simulation was a good idea? So it's not just we want to reject going into this 5D, we want to reject going into the deep. We want to figure out how to get to 1D. We want to go backwards. We want to use this as a way of, how did I get into this one? What was the trick that was used on me to get into this one? So the work is always going backwards. But it seems like it's all about how to reject. This is where, and I love the people who are anti the transhumanistic movement and are talking about. But one of the ways they talk about is this is really bad, right? The transhumanistic system really bad, AI system really bad, Earth system really good. Right? So you want to focus on family and nature and animals and going to the park. Well, okay, but what you're really choosing is one simulation over another. The Matrix still wins. Because what will happen is when we get to the end point, the Matrix hopes that everyone and everything will jump into the new simulation. Some won't. Some won't do it, but they haven't done enough to exit. They can't leave. They didn't fully awaken their divine spark. So what happens to them? They're going to go right back to the start of this, reloop, and start this experience all over again. And I can see it being built that there's a whole segment being presented without the knowledge of the people running it, of not running it, but the people knowledge who are sharing their honest concerns of what's being done, but they're rejecting A, but bizarrely accepting B, the thing they're already in. Almost it's going to like be a setup of just like, oh yeah, and then I don't want that, but I want that Earth thing is pretty good, and here they go, doing it all over again. Run through another 1,000 years, oh yeah, the transhumanism thing, no, we got to stand up against it, I'm not, and back they come again. The tricks are enormous. Everything is a trick. Everything is a trick.
Bastards, aren't they? Wow. It's do you because we're obviously powerful, otherwise they wouldn't do it. We're the energy source, aren't they? I mean, if we were to leave, the whole thing is just going to break down, is it? So they need us here. So we're obviously very powerful, and we need to realize who we truly are in that respect. It's mind-blowing, Howdie, but this is why I was so excited to speak to you, because this is exactly where, for whatever reason, I landed at this point, and I'm going, this place is insane. It's literally bonkers, and it's getting worse. And and it's cruel, it's brutal, but then it's beautiful as well. It's there's true beauty here, and there's love here, you know. And I always say I always will try and have a good day, you know, full of challenges, but I'll always have a good day as best as I possibly can. I always find love in what I can, because I don't, as much as I need to do the work, I don't want to have a shit experience. I've had a lot of shit experiences, and I've had enough of shit experiences as well.
You try your best to I don't want to say like the world. That's not the right way of describing it, but
I know what you mean.
But just to appreciate moments of sanity. That's the best way I can describe it, right? Is the best way to deal with an insane reality is to become totally sane yourself in all moments. But I also know, even in the sane moments, how many people are being raped all over the world, how many dogs are being abused, how many, you know, this, how many, it's like, as long as that's still going on, even though, because someone can say, well, I'm having an okay life. My life is fine. I feel good, so it doesn't matter. Well, yeah, but the reality, just because your life is okay doesn't mean that the rest of reality sucks. So I don't forget that. Like, I don't forget that in a moment of peacefulness or a moment of like a little bit of enjoyment or whatnot, that a lot of others in the world are suffering, like right now, this second, intensely, and they're going to suffer tomorrow and the next day. And I try to, in my own way at least, acknowledge them and kind of say, well, I hope that, not that necessarily you'll find me or something, that you'll read my book. I don't mean it like that, but that somehow some of the suffering people can get to this piece of information that they need, that might make them start asking, maybe if I look at everything a bit differently here, I'll get a different answer than I've always had. And yeah, it's, but at the same time, the more sane you become and the more clear you become, the Matrix doesn't like that. Like, it's the best, the best. What was the Albert Camus? Is he the one that said, or was it Jean-Paul Sartre? The best way to deal with an unfree world is to live in a completely free way. It was something like that, right? Which is, again, you're seeing what the Matrix is, and you're saying, not just will I reject from the standpoint of interacting with it in that way, I am going to transform into being its opposite, at least in the one tiny little space that I inhabit as this thing in this reality, and try to do that the best you can, and just be available to, you know, like, and it's little things, people. It's little things like, I walk through the forest and maybe you find a nail in a tree. And I can feel, oh, I think the tree is suffering from that. So I think about it a bit, I check it out, you maybe talk to the tree, you come back and you find, because not necessarily taking a nail out of a tree is the best thing to do. Like, sometimes that can actually hurt the tree more than having the nail in it. So you've kind of got to have a little discussion with the tree. But if the tree feels like taking the nail out is the best thing to do, then you do that. You've helped another creature within our reality. And it's also important, when you do these things, to never tell anybody that you do them. No one else, because as soon as you tell somebody, oh, let me tell you what I did today, you've turned a selfless act into a building up of my own ego, as opposed to, I've just done something to help another creature and no one ever needs to know about it. There's the power. Like, when you go buy a homeless person some food and some sandwiches or whatever, and never tell anybody for the rest of your life that you did that, you cannot believe the actual power, the ripples of power something as small as that actually creates, because it's truly then selfless. I
love that, Howdie. Because it is, because the ego is desperate to go, look what I just did, because I'm a good guy. You know, and but then you
should reward me now. I should get something. That's one of the reasons people do nice things. They do
Yeah,
nice things, not because they're really being nice. They're doing it because they think, and then God's going to give me something back.
that's
God,
right.
I'm now deserving, so God, pay up. That's what, and
Yeah,
that. So it's not true selfless help. It's not true
that's all.
selfless giving.
That's all the
There's,
trauma and all the programming and everything else we endure from birth.
yeah.
It's all that. Wow, Howdy. What a world, eh? And wow, I could talk to you for hours, Howdy, and I know that you've got to get off and stuff. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate your time. Is there any messages you'd like to leave with anybody? Where can people find your work, buy your books? It's wonderful.
Yeah, I guess the easiest thing, if people are interested to read a bit more, look into some stuff a bit more, is my website is howdiemickoski.com. From there, you can read sample chapters of all the books. And like any author, it's always nice if you think the author has something to say to pick up one of their books somewhere along the way, and you can buy them just about anywhere if you want that. I also, for a lot of them, I sell PDF files now off my site, just because I want to make sure that the material is available cheaply for people. And as soon as, for some people, having to pay for the shipping and all sorts of, can be really expensive. And so there's also cheap PDF files. And I don't really talk openly. I do a few interviews now like this, but very few. I had a YouTube channel for a long time. I don't really do anything there anymore other than the odd update. I'm on Locals now. That's where I have a community, and we, most of everything I do on Locals is free. There's like a $3 charge or something a month for just, it's like, well, why do you charging people money to talk to them? Well, I'm charging people money to because bots and all sorts of like AI stuff, they're not going to pay $3 to come on and start spamming my site, right? So that's really why I charge this little fee, is so that the community gets a better opportunity to not have to deal with what the outside community is starting to become. A lot of these platforms are becoming very challenging to interact with, very challenging energetically to interact with. And so I'll make this last. So that's, if you're interested in looking for my information, you're more than welcome to check there and go check around. But wherever you're watching stuff on the internet, in particular, that's how we get our information, average people now, is it's actually from videos, right? It's not from going to websites anymore. Like if you need to know how to do something in your car, you type into YouTube, how to change my tires or how to change my transmission, literally. Remember, this is AI's, the realm, the Archons are AI. The internet is the home of Archon world. They have a much more hard time getting in and out of this world. They have a real easy time getting in and out of that world, this particular world we're on right now. So it's just a reminder that it's easy to not be clear when you come on to something like this, but go on, when you start going on the internet, have an intention of what you're going for, have an intention of that it's your time there is positive and for yourself. And when you're done, you remind yourself that you're leaving that space, you're leaving it there, and you're going back into a more real reality. And you don't want to take it with you, if that makes sense. You want to really have this separation wall between an AI world and a non-AI world. And I think that's, if you can kind of keep that reminder, I think that will also keep you a bit more stable and keep some of the junk from following you around in your day.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Howdy. I really appreciate your time. I hope we can do this again sometime. Pleasure, absolute honor. Thank you so much.
Thanks again for having me. And yeah, let's look into things as the year goes on and see what kind of response this gets. And if people want us to do it again, we can talk about it.